Welcome to the Financial Co-Pilot podcast and video channel, where airline pilot and CFP professional Dan Lomar shares techniques, interviews, and perspectives about financial planning and life in general for airline pilots. Here's your host, Dan Lomar.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you don't mind. I am not dressed up today, but it's somewhat of a day off, but hopefully the content will make up for it. So anyway, hey, today we're talking about something a little bit on the financially geeky side called sequence of returns risk. The reason I bring this up today is because when I talked about in my last two videos, Social Security and PBGC, delaying those two things, okay, by delaying those two things, it produces a bigger income that you can't outlive. But of course, we're delaying those 5 years. Where do we get that money? Well, it has to come from our savings or from our portfolio. And so in finance, there's nothing that's risk-free. When we trade one risk, we usually pick it up somewhere else. And by delaying PBGC and Social Security, we increase what's called the sequence of returns risk. And so, and what that is essentially, if you were to have a down year in the markets, and on average, every 5 years has a negative return. And if you were to pull out your fixed amount, the same amount of money, and say, let's just say your portfolio is down 15%, which is fairly normal for a 60-40 balanced portfolio. If you were to do that, then that $40,000 you're pulling out of a $1 million portfolio, now it's $40,000 coming out of an $850,000 portfolio, which now that the percentage increases. Okay, so all that provides a little bit of a headwind on the portfolio. So there's things we can do about that also, but the reason I want to talk about it is, again, when we delay Social Security and delay PBGC, we kind of pick up that additional risk. But again, there's things we can do to hedge that. So that's what we're talking about today. Again, mentioned it. I'm bringing it up now because I mentioned it in the last two videos. So. Hey, before we get going, remember to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you know when new videos come out, and remember to share this video because, again, I say it every time, those who need to listen to this or need to watch it are probably not the ones tuning into it, and especially this one. This one's a little bit on the financially geeky side. This is more probably geared toward those who are going to be doing it, but also I want people to know what I'm doing, what I do behind the scenes when I'm developing a retirement income strategy, so that there's a lot to take into account. So let's jump into it. This will be, this is going to be my third video now in a series about retirement income planning, how to design retirement income from a portfolio. And the first two videos were really what I talked about with Social Security and PBGC. And so there's a lot to consider when it comes to designing a retirement income strategy. There's so much to consider. So much is about research, the markets, personal situation. So I think it's worth covering some of these things. And again, today we're talking about this thing called sequence of returns risk. And really, in summary, the way I like to think of it too, when it comes to designing a retirement income strategy, is really you're balancing two things. You're balancing the fact that you want to enjoy everything you work for. You want to spend as much money as you can, but at the same time, you don't want to outlive it. You don't want to outspend yourself so that, towards the end of life, you don't have any more money left and you run out of money. And just to kind of recap that, my business partner, Alan Bewley, he said it the best. He goes, hey, there's two phone calls we don't ever want to get as advisors. And that is, one, I'm on my deathbed, Dan, and I got millions of dollars I never spent. And so the other side of that is, hey, I'm 90 years old and I'm out of money. So those are the kind of things, those are the two big opposing forces we're always looking at when it comes to designing a retirement income. So anyway, it just kind of as a reference, a lot of people refer to what's called the 4% rule when it comes to designing retirement income. And the 4% rule was never actually a strategy. It was actually just research done by a guy named Bill Bengen back in the 90s. And without really getting into it, because there's a lot of flaws, it's a great reference point, and I still use it myself in conversation and as a reference. But there are flaws with it as an investment withdrawal strategy. So there's more to it. So if you're familiar with the 4% rule, in a nutshell, what it says is, hey, Bill Bengen said, hey, over the sequence of returns back from Current day, he did this study back in the 1990s. Going back to the 1920s, he looked at rolling 30-year periods, and he said, hey, if I am 60% in the S&P 500 and 40% in an intermediate bond portfolio, what's the maximum I could take out and never run out of money? And that was 4%. And so that's kind of what that's referenced to. But again, it was never a strategy. And there's a lot of things, there's a lot of ways to tweak it. But again, the reason I mention that is because it's more involved. If you just think, hey, I'm going to do the 4% rule, hey, look, you might shortchange yourself. And there's also ways that it might be too much. We don't really know. But that's a whole nother video I'm going to do down the road, is talk about just the 4% rule and that particular study. So anyway, for today, what we're talking about is sequence of returns risk. And again, what I mentioned is that if you have a down year, say your portfolio is down 15%, and you pull out the same dollar amount as you did the previous year, it's a higher percentage. So as you say you got $1 million portfolio, you're going to plan on taking out $40,000 a year, and you have a 15% correction. Well, that $40,000 a year goes from 4% withdrawal to a 4.7% withdrawal. If that portfolio goes down to $850,000. And again, that because it's a bigger percentage and you continue to withdraw that money, it has a big headwind. I'm going to show you exactly what that is in just a second. So again, the reason it's so important to see is because we have a tendency to use average returns. And if you look at this graphic right here, you can see here that average returns could be extremely, extremely deceiving. Okay, the average sign here says average depth 3 feet, but this guy's in well over his head, and there's probably 10 feet of water. But the average depth is 3 feet, and I'm going to show you that too in some of these charts, which makes a very, very interesting discussion when you look at these things. So let's take a look at what that is. I did just a simple scenario here with $1 million portfolio, and I'm going to withdraw $40,000 at them. Okay, so it's kind of like the 4% rule I talked about. Real nice, simple. I'm not doing anything fancy here. I'm not adjusting that $40,000 per year for inflation or anything like that. It's just a straight $40,000. So we start out with a $40,000 portfolio or a $1 million portfolio. We're withdrawing $40,000 a year, and what I did is I looked at a real portfolio back to 1990, and I used the exact sequence of returns that 60/40 portfolio produced over the 30-year period from 1990 to 2020, and I used the exact same sequence of returns and produced an average return. Again, I'm just using average 8.41%. And at the end of it, you had a $5.3 million portfolio. There's a lot more that I could talk about as to that goes into that particular number right there, but I'm going to leave it for another discussion. So what we did this time is instead I took the exact same portfolio, and I just mixed the returns around, and I put it into a worst case scenario, and that was all the negative returns first, followed by all the increasing positive returns. And the average, again, 8.41%. That was the average return, 8.41%. The portfolio ran out after 23 years, and we ended up with a negative balance of minus $596,000. So obviously, you can't go below zero. But for demonstration purposes, this portfolio ran out after 23 years. And again, the average return was exactly the same. I used the exact same numbers. Here we are. I did the same thing. This time I went high to low. Average return 8.41%, exactly the same. I went highest returns first, and this is as we're withdrawing money. And again, now we end up with $7.1 million in the end. Same average return, 8.41%. And then this one, I just kind of mixed them up. Average return, 8.41%. And we end up with a $6.1 million portfolio. So as you can see here, this is the portfolio graph right here. Okay, positive returns here on the top. This is the best case scenario. Here you got negative returns first. So you can see here the portfolio runs out. The blue line is what the portfolio actually did as a historical sequence. And then the orange line here is basically that sequence where I could just mixed them up. and chopped them in half and just swapped them around a little bit. So you can see here the exact same average return, 8.41%, produces dramatically different results. And so that's why it's so important to know what the big deal is here and why sequence returns makes a big difference. So what can we do about it? Now that we've seen that this is the possibility, that the order in which our returns come, now that we see that, what can we really do about it? And that is a couple of things. I always say, if we're going to delay Social Security, we plan on delaying it out to age 70. That'd be Social Security or PBGC. We plan on delaying it out to age 70 if we can. Again, there's times I don't recommend that based on different things. So don't always do that. But whatever. Let's just say everything's in place. So, hey, let's plan on delaying Social Security and PBGC out to age 70. We know we're going to increase sequence of returns risk when we do that. So we say, all right, what are the things we can do to hedge sequence of returns risk if it starts to show its ugly face? And that is, well, we can evaluate on a year-to-year basis. Well, what if we now start Social Security and PBGC? What does that look like? What does that look like to the plan? The other thing to do is we can create a 5-year portfolio. We call it the delay bucket. And we can say, hey, this is exactly what we're planning on spending over the next 5 years until we start Social Security and PBGC. And we can say to ourselves, hey, look, we're going to withdraw from this very conservative portfolio, which is mostly money market, cash, CD, short-term bonds, and a little bit of equities, maybe 20% equities, just so there is still some growth in there. Treasury inflation, protected bonds, things like that. And we can do that. We say, hey, look, let's build this 5 years of income. We call it the delay bucket. And so that there is no stock market risk on that 5 years of income. The problem, again, with that in that case is that you give up growth. Okay, so now it's in very, very conservative investments. That could be as much as 20%, 30% of your portfolio. So now that doesn't have any growth in it. So again, you're kind of giving up that opportunity to avoid the sequence of returns risk. And the other thing too, what I've done is I had a client last year who had cash value life insurance policy. He had bought a deferred annuity many years ago, and we combined those things and turned it into a 5-year period certain annuity, and that perfectly gave him the income he needed during that time period. Okay, so those were two conservative investments he already had, and that fit perfectly into it. So you could always take a 5-year annuity and bridge the gap that way. So it's another way that would kind of sequence that. That would kind of alleviate that. Now, sequence of returns risk never completely goes away. We're delaying it. If we did that and delayed it out to age 70, yeah, this still exists at 70, but it's not quite as much there. Because one, your time period is shorter, and then also because you're now taking PBGC and Social Security or whatever other annuity you might have. And the other thing too is I'm going to do a whole video on this. Is something called income guardrails, and this is really probably one of the best things that has come out here recently as to some of the academic research on how to manage risk and opportunity and growth and income and all that stuff put together. And this strategy is what's called income guardrails. And what that is that say your portfolio continues to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, you can take more money out. Again, you don't have that phone call, hey, I'm on my deathbed and I've got millions of dollars I never spent. And so, you want to have some rules in place so that you can actually give yourself a pay raise. On the other hand, you want to have some rules in place so that if we do have down years and we have to take a pay cut, maybe a 5% or a 10% pay cut, we want to have some guidelines in place for that. Here's just a quick example of what that strategy would look like. And there's a ton of math that goes into this. And I think if you're going to try to figure this out on your own and know exactly what your guardrails are going to be, it's rather difficult to do without the software. But let's just say if you started with a $2.1 million portfolio and between Social Security and PBGC, you're going to produce $170,000 a year in gross income or $14,200 per month. That's going to be your gross income. You would have some guardrails in place. And we said, hey, if the portfolio went to we'll just call this $2.3 million, we're going to give ourselves a 5% pay raise. If the portfolio goes down to 1.78 million, we're going to give ourselves a 5% pay cut. And the amount of pay cut we take and the amount of pay raise we might give ourselves is really a lot of personal discretion there. There's a lot of leeway. There's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to designing exactly what you'd like that to look like, because you can have a very aggressive withdrawals, you can have very conservative withdrawals, and in those two things, those two parameters change where your guardrails are going to be. So I wanted to mention that because it's a very fascinating subject on a flexible withdrawal strategy. And the whole idea of that is that a flexible withdrawal strategy, if you're willing to be flexible with that, the whole idea of it is that research shows it can increase your overall lifetime spending above what, let's say, a constantly inflation-adjusted withdrawal rate might do for you. So anyway, there's more to that to come. That is sequence of returns risk. Know about it. If you're doing this yourself, you definitely want to know about it. You want to know how to hedge it. Know that it exists. So again, you're kind of optimizing your income, spending as much as you can, but not outliving it at the same time. So, hey, I hope that all makes sense. I know today this is a little bit of a financially geeky topic, but this is what I do, and it's worth sharing. So, along with that, along those lines, that it's worth sharing. Hey, share this video. Get the word out. If this is not your cup of tea, contact me. Let's talk. Let's talk about retiring. Let's talk about generating a retirement income strategy for you as retirement is coming up. So, hey, I hope that helps. Remember to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you know when new videos come out. Share this video, give me a like, and until next time, fly safe.